please.
First item are minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting held Monday, October 4th. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item.
Item 2 is a delegation from Matthew Cheng Architect Incorporated, regarding housing choices pre-application for 820 Robinson Street. And I'll just ask Mr. Cheng to come up to the podium.
Thank you. Come ahead. Your name and address for the record, please, Mr. Cheng.
My name is Matthew Cheng Architect. It's 670 Evans Avenue in Vancouver.
Okay, thank you. This is a presentation only from Mr. Cheng. There's no resolution to go along with this, so please go ahead.
We are proposing a housing choice for this particular property. Right now, this property is a
Mr. Cheng, one moment, please, to staff, or do you have a picture that you can put up for the audience so we can see what we're talking about? We love pictures.
Okay, we have one here.
Keep going. Oh, it's sideways. There we are. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Cheng.
Sure. Okay, the current zoning of this property is RT1, which is a duplex zoning. And right now on the property, it is a vacant house. It's a one-story duplex structure, and it is a vacant building, and it's not a very pleasant building, so it's quite an eyesore to the neighbors. So we are proposing to have two family units buildings on this property. Like a duplex, like a two duplexes building on this property. And each building will have 2 units, and each unit will be about 1,200 to 1,300 square feet of 3-bedroom units.
Title?
Strata title.
Thank you.
And the intention is to make it look like 2 single house building, not like a very typical side-by-side kind of duplexes, and make it so that it could be blended into the neighborhood. And especially this is the corner site, so especially on the right-hand side of the image, it is like a corner, so that the entrance to the unit will be one on each side, so that the building will look like a single family from each elevation and each facade. And we have done all this articulation, bay window, change of material, colors, and everything to make it, to blend into the neighborhood. And we haven't decided yet. We haven't designed yet, but there will be a lot of landscaping around the building, when we further develop the projects. Regarding the parking, we are providing 2 parking spaces per unit, but there will be 1 parking space within the parking structure. There will be like 1 indoor parking and 1 outdoor parking, so that so that we can have 2 parking spaces, but it's not too crowded at the back lane area. So we are proposing this and more affordable kind of size of housing. To give more choices to the neighbor in this neighborhood, and we believe that our design will blend into the neighbor pretty well. That's my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing none. Mr. Cheng, I really appreciate this. I think you've done a wonderful job with the corner lot. I must mention to you, however, we have more housing choices now than duplexes, too. We also have separate units, and it's zoning that's imminent any day now coming forward to us. with splitting these units and sort of having 2 smaller units on one lot, or 4 smaller units in this case because of the size of the lot. So thank you for this, and I urge you to keep discussing these housing options with council, and I appreciate your innovation.
Thank you very much
for coming forward.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item 3 is a delegation from Sandy Burpee of the Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group related to 3030 Gordon Avenue. I'll just ask Mr. Burpee to come forward.
Thank you. Do staff have a presentation as well, and do you want to wait till Mr. Burpee is finished, or when did you want to do it? Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. There's a couple of delegations. There's Mr. Burpee, and there's 3 other delegations. So,
I understand that.
but if they wish to make their presentation, then item 8, I think, is on the agenda, and we've got a brief presentation ourselves at that time.
After the delegations? After the delegations. Fine. Thank you very much. Mr. Burpee, welcome. Your name and address for the record, please.
Sandy Burpee, 985 Corona Crescent, Coquitlam.
And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear today. The proposed 30-bed emergency shelter and transitional housing at 3030 Gordon Avenue will be more than just a roof. It will provide a gateway to more permanent housing solutions and reintegration with the community. Rather than a warehouse for troubled souls, it will be a process, a source of triage where persons without a home can have their needs assessed and then be connected with the services that each requires to get off the street. It could be employment programs, medical, mental health and addiction services, life skills development. The operator will be a non-profit organization with experience in managing homeless persons and providing supports and services. When selected, the operator will sign an operating agreement with BC Housing to ensure appropriate and effective services are provided. In addition, staff is recommending that a good neighbor agreement between the city and the operator be developed to engage adjacent property owners on an ongoing basis to jointly manage any issues and activities on the site, and to ensure that any issues or concerns that arise are dealt with in a timely and effective manner. I understand and respect the neighborhood's concerns for the impact that 3030 Gordon might have on them. I expect it is informed by the fear of the unknown and the specter of the downtown east side. And I'd like to address each one of them. First of all, community safety. The Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association recently reported that when additional shelters were operated, downtown street crime declined. To quote Charles Gauthier, the executive director, we've seen a reduction in the number of people sleeping on the street, and we've also seen a corresponding reduction in street disorderly behavior. So everything from aggressive panhandling to open drug use to trespassing on private property. A 2006 Vancouver City Hall review analyzed complaints against 148 special needs residential facilities in the city and found there was a consistent pattern of neighborhood opposition when the facilities were first proposed, and that neighbors were most concerned about reduction of property values, noise disruptions, and safety and crime. And the report concluded that fears are not warranted and found that the vast majority of these facilities operate without negatively affecting their neighbors. Second, property values. Opponents claim that the market value of the properties will decline, but experience elsewhere does not show this. A 2007 study commissioned by Vancouver Coastal Health and cited multiple research papers concluded there is no negative impact on safety or property values in a neighborhood when new social housing is opened. Third, wrong location. Opponents have often cited the Riverview lands as a better location. The 3030 Gordon site, as you know, was selected because of its proximity to the homeless population, community services, retail stores, and public transportation. Previous surveys have suggested that about 1/3 of the homeless persons in the Tri-Cities have mental health issues. Some of those probably need the intensive care and isolation that could be provided at Riverview, but most need to be reconnected with the community, not isolated from it. Council veterans of the Cold Weather MAT program and 528 Como Lake rezoning have heard these arguments before. Although research advises that 3030 Gordon will not have a negative impact on the neighborhood, many opponents will likely not take someone else's word for it. However, a good neighbor agreement will provide a safety valve for neighbors, a way for neighbors and council to hold the facility operators' feet to the fire, as well as to integrate the facility into the neighborhood. One comment submitted to the city stated, although I don't live in the Coquitlam area, I do work very close to the 3030 Gordon site. I live 2 blocks away from the emergency shelter and transitional housing in North Vancouver and have never had an issue with it. For the first 5 years that I drove by it every day, I didn't even know what it was. The Vancouver Coast Health Study found the opinions of neighbors have been reported to change over time, with initial opposition being replaced by the view that residents of community housing facilities are good neighbors. Providing assistance to the most vulnerable in this community is the right thing to do. Homelessness is a regional problem, and the Tri-Cities, with its high cost of housing and finite supply of services to people under stress, is as likely as much of a generator of homelessness as any other area of Metro Vancouver. If the 3030 Gordon Avenue rezoning is approved, Coquitlam will be creating, together with Coleman Lake Gardens, 60 units of supported transitional housing, as well as 30 emergency shelter beds. This is leadership. Thank you. I'd like to say more, but I also respect the committee's time this afternoon. I have a brief, which I appreciate if it could be circulated to the members of the committee.
Okay, you just give it to the clerk. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Burpee? Okay, thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item 4 is a delegation from Rob Thiessen of the Hope for Freedom Society, also related to 3030 Gordon Avenue. Just ask Mr. Thiessen to come forward.
Thank you. I'm just doing this very technical button pushing. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Thiessen. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Thiessen. I live at 22902 Billy Brown Road, Fort Langley, and I represent Hope for Freedom Society here this afternoon. Hope for Freedom Society is in support of the rezone of 3030 Gordon Avenue because of the impact it will have on the homeless population and the impact it will have on the community in general. There are many positive impacts, but in the interest of time, I want to limit my comments to a few. From our experience, there are 3 impacts I wish to talk about today. First, when we have a shelter available to homeless people, our ability to move them into permanent housing increases dramatically. Since 2007, December of 2007, we have had a homeless shelter in churches for 14 months of the last 3 years. During those 14 months, we've been able to move 113 people from homelessness to housing. Since December 2007, same period, we had 22 months in the last 3 years without a shelter. During those months, we were able to move 73 people from homelessness to housing. If you do the math, we are able to move almost 3 times the homeless to housing during shelter periods. That is the principal reason Hope for Freedom Society supports this rezone initiative, because shelters have positively impacted homeless people in our region. Secondly, since the start of the shelter program in the Church of Fall 2007, we have been able to engage over 600 community volunteers in helping shelter, feed, clothe, and serve the homeless during the shelter months, and they are eager to continue as we move forward to a permanent facility. It has raised awareness of this important social justice issue, and I believe it has been instrumental in bringing us to this point that you guys are examining here today, providing a permanent place for a shelter. As a result of existing shelter programs, many local businesses have become involved in supporting what we do, and on this issue I could go on and on. Shelters have positively impacted many local citizens and some of our business community. Thirdly, when we attempted to gain permission to shelter homeless back 3 years ago, there was lots of opposition, as you may all well know, in this room. Everybody remembers the 8-hour public hearing in this chamber 3 years ago. We heard many people predict dire consequences if we brought homeless people into their community. We heard everything from loss of property value, to needles laying around everywhere, to theft of personal property, risk to children, increased drug activity in the areas, increased health risks, etc. You have all heard this before, and in the 3 years that we have operated a shelter in the locations we operated, nothing has happened. None of the dire circumstances came to pass, and it is our belief that nothing will happen during our coming shelter period starting November 1, and I also believe that nothing will happen if there's a permanent shelter constructed at 3030 Gordon. There are a number of strong opponents to our shelter program in the past that have since changed their minds because they had become involved and have volunteered and discovered that what we're actually doing is great help to homeless people. And these strong opponents have now become supporters. And that is what we are trying to achieve. So shelters do not negatively impact the surrounding community. Our organization can only imagine how a permanent shelter, with its increased services, will allow us to maximize the positive impacts on both the community and the homeless subculture among us. This is a good thing we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Robinson, go ahead.
Would you mind just making those numbers available to the clerk that you...
Yeah, I can give her this.
That would be great, thank you.
It's got my scribbles on it. But
Okay, members of the committee first. Councillor Nicholson. Thank you. Councillor Reamer. Oh, okay, I thought everyone had their little lights on.
They're all on.
Well then,
They're all on.
did you have a question, Councillor Sikora?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Mr. Thiessen, you were promoting also containers for social housing now, and you also mentioned 3030 Gordon. Now, what are you supporting? Containers on 3030 Gordon or real social housing?
Excuse me, Councillor Sikora, we are not discussing containers here
I know you're not, but the fact is that he was on radio. A lot of people heard. I was on the same radio station, and he was mentioning containers on 3030 Gordon. Now, I think the public has a right to hear about that.
They do have a right to know that. This is not the place, but I will give you one moment to answer, and then we're going on with our agenda. I'm not getting sidetracked.
and I don't wish to sidetrack the issue either. The container issue is a proposal that we're putting forward that will fill the time gap between when our church shelter program ends and a permanent shelter is constructed. And there is no definite site in place at this time.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Thiessen, before you sit down, just to reiterate, if I remember rightly, it was the Eagle Ridge neighborhood. Is that still on for this year? The church in Eagle Ridge for the cold weather map program?
All three Coquitlam churches are involved, which is Calvary Baptist.
Calvary Baptist, which is
Coquitlam
near
Alliance.
Parkland School, and the Alliance
Church at the east end
and
of
Eagle
Como
Ridge
Lake.
is on as well. I'm asking because they've redone their church, and that's why I was
Yeah,
asking.
no, they're still in.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, next item, please.
Item 5 is a delegation from Garry Badour, also related to 3030 Gordon Avenue.
Okay. Come forward, please. Welcome, Mr.
afternoon.
Badour. Could I have your name and address for the
My
record?
name is Garry Badour. I live at 968 Hoy Street in Coquitlam.
I knew that. Good.
I've recently built a $600,000 green home in Coquitlam on Hoy Street right over there. I've probably got the only green home in Coquitlam. Just haven't finished my kitchen, so I haven't let everybody know about it. That's a great neighborhood.
Yeah,
I've lived there for 40 years. It's a great place to go. It's got great location for just about everybody living around there. It's fantastic. The introduction of this unit, this transition house to this area will be very bad for our neighborhood. While I built my house, I've had my building permit completed for a year now. While I built my house, I had 3 crackheads working for me. I knew them before. I used to run the pool league in the Tri-Cities area and all the pubs around, so I knew a lot of people around here, and I saw a lot of people get in trouble and a lot of people get themselves out of trouble. 2 of these people went to the Maple Ridge house. They told me, do not allow this thing into your neighborhood if you can stop it. The other one went to Calgary, and he's doing fine. They still keep in touch with me. They phone me. They let me know how they're doing, and I think that it's commendable what these people are doing. But it should not be in a residential district. Bus fare, doctors, cafes, restaurants, everything is available all around Coquitlam. Personally, I believe the Pacific Reach is the place to put them, where there is no residential houses around there, where bad influences won't hit people around there. I go out my street, and I've stopped homeless people from going through people's yards. One guy wanted to attack me. There's a guy living down by the river right now. He's been there for a year and a half in the same spot. That's not homeless. That's squatting. I mean, I would love to have property on the river. You know, if you go to these people behind Gates Park, at the end of Cheyenne Avenue, underneath the Red Bridge, all those areas there, they're settled. They're in there. They got couches and chairs, and underneath the Red Bridge, they got a little raft for playing on the river. They got their bicycles there. They're doing fine. I walk my dogs every day. I see this pregnant girl. I talk to her. This one homeless guy comes out, and he walks on her side of the path. She goes to the other side. He comes to her side. He's the guy that's been there for a year and a half. This doesn't make sense. The Vancouver Sun, July 24, 2009. Homeless shelter is a magnet for mayhem in Falls Creek. I'm just going to quote one line from there. In 12 years of living in Falls Creek North, I have never seen such a disturbing sight. Residents no longer feel safe in their own neighborhoods. This is 4 or 5 months after this was put in there, and it still continues. We petitioned our neighborhood. In our neighborhood, I ran into 4 people who had moved from these areas. 2 of them said that's why they moved from these areas. One didn't even mention Oxford Street. I don't know what's on Oxford Street. I don't live on that side. But they talked about that, how they're afraid to go out and do these kind of things. You know, to walk around. And you talk to people from Mount Pleasant area, they will say to you, the police don't even come there anymore. You can phone them. The police will say, have they got anything in their hands? Did you see them break into the building? Did you see them carry something out? You know, and that's an invasion of privacy. They're going into your yards all the time looking for stuff. They say they're looking for bottles. One guy almost attacked me because I said, what are you doing in my neighbor's yard? He said, I'm looking for bottles. I said, we have recycling collections. You know, we have that picked up on Tuesday. We put our stuff out. You don't need to go looking for bottles. There are no bottles in people's yards. Next thing you see them going down the street with 2 bicycles. I mean, it's ridiculous. People don't phone in and complain. If you think that the crime rate is down in these areas, you're wrong. People are afraid to complain because the police won't do anything. The police won't do anything because they're hearing it constantly over and over and over again. They've got more important things to do than that. You know, I checked your mandate for your committee. Your mandate is to strengthen neighborhoods, protect and enhance, emphasizing a sense of place and belonging. Let's keep it that way. You guys are our protection from bad things happening in our neighborhood. You know, I mean, if you think nothing happens, you're living in another world altogether. I hear stories about North Vancouver. Somebody just mentioned North Vancouver. I mean, if we could have the time and the energy and the manpower to go out there, we could get hundreds of names talking about how bad it is. Surrey, same thing. Instant mayhem again there, right? People have to lock their car door. Well, you got to do that anyway, pardon me, but, you know, you got to put stuff away. You can't leave things around. You got to build a gate. You got to build a fence. You know, you got to put up barriers to keep these people out. You know, the fact that it's over here in the Gordon Avenue area, it's ridiculous. You know, the Coquitlam River is one of the most beautiful places in this whole lower mainland. There's thousands of kids play down there every day in the summertime. I walk my dogs. I got to step over human poop, toilet paper. My wife cleans up garbage every Saturday when we go for a walk. Other people do the same thing. We've seen them that. We're taking care of it ourselves. You know, you can't have these people living in the bush there. And if you say this is where they're coming from, they're not coming from here. They're coming from everywhere else. They're all over the place. And we're going to bring in more because we're telling them, come on, live in this beautiful river area here. You got nice fresh water. You got a nice place to camp. Nobody's going to hassle you because they're in favor of it. And when it gets cold, you can go crash over there. Okay, so the homeless people need a place. But the drug addicts, you know, they're the ones that are going to cost most of it. You know, and mental health people, they belong somewhere to be taken care of. But the drug addicts, you know, you got to give them a little slap. You got to give them a hand. But you got to shake them up, you know. You got to keep at them. And I imagine these people do a very wonderful job with that. We need that kind of stuff. We need to get these people straight. But while they're not there, you talk to somebody from Maple Ridge who goes through the system. They said, you know, they go out, you walk around, and there's somebody hitting up on that corner over there. There's somebody smoking crack over here, right? There's somebody just hanging around. Their friends come from other areas to hang out with them. Drug dealers come in because when they come out of the building, they know where they are. You know, not all people who go into those situations survive. Very few do. The rest of them cause mayhem in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Your 5 minutes are up a little while ago.
Thank you very much. I would like to be referred to the voting meeting if that's possible.
You don't have to. It will take place immediately after all the delegations.
Okay.
And you'll hear if it goes to public hearing, and then you're more than welcome to come again. As well, we have a police officer that will be presenting as well after your delegation.
You know, let's end this now. Get on, find them a place, but not here, not where there's kids.
Thank you for coming. Next item, please.
Item 6 is a delegation from Dana and Greg MacDonald, also in relation to 3030 Gordon Avenue.
Thank you. Popular address today.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg MacDonald. I live at 3022 Reese Avenue, so I'm very close to this.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald.
A bit about myself. I've been a Coquitlam homeowner for 28 years. I'm a retired TELUS manager, and I raised my family in this neighborhood. We chose to stay in this neighborhood because it was a safe area for children. Neighbors take care and watch out for each other in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is going through a revitalization. There are new houses being built, older homes being renovated, and young families moving into our area. The reason people buy here is it's more affordable than other areas. The reason people stay is because it's a safe, quiet, and family-friendly area. We want to keep it that way. Who we represent, we solicited comment sheets and circulate petition in the Westwood neighborhood bordered by CP Rail, Westwood Avenue, Lougheed Highway, and Kingsway Avenue. Overwhelmingly, majority of our neighbors, 293 signatures within the area described, strongly oppose this development. Others have also circulated petitions in this area with the same results. Overwhelming majority support helping the less fortunate, but we do not support building this type of facility in a residential area. We have some concerns. There was no studies undertaken by Coquitlam to assess neighborhood impacts regarding crime rates, property damage, vehicle break-ins, assaults, etc. We are concerned about neighborhood safety. Many young families with children in the area. We will not feel safe in our own neighborhood if plan is approved. The streets are a school catchment area. The size of the building is a major concern. It's 4.5 stories, 50 feet from backyards of our neighbors. We're concerned about the amount of people who will use the facility, and we have a concern that shelter will become a magnet for homeless from other areas, making the problem worse, not improving it. My experience in areas with homelessness, and I speak from a TELUS perspective, I worked in the Wally area where they have a large homeless population. We had to install $100,000 worth of security gates to keep them off our property. They were in there at all hours, stealing anything they could take out of it. As well, I've worked in the Westwood one right adjacent to 3030 Gordon. We were constantly having break-ins into our compound, truck break-ins, copper thefts. Most of them were coming from the homeless on both sides in the bush and on the old metal plant there. They would just, daily, weekly go through the fence and take whatever they wanted. So that caused a lot of insurance claims for us and a lot of hassle trying to recover equipment that we use for testing, that sort of thing. Let's see, neighborhood safety. Many young families with children in the area will not feel safe in our own neighborhood if plan is approved. The streets are a school catchment area. We also fear theft, threats, trespass. I have accosted people on my own property in my own garage. Basically, I cornered a guy, not unwillingly cornered a guy because I had come around my backyard in my garage and he was in there. He threatened me with my life if I did not let him out of my garage. And as Garry said, really there's no point in phoning the police on these. Most of this is petty crime, but it really just makes the area feel unsafe for all of us. We also feel the Land Use Committee is not impartial. There's possible conflict of interest of members sitting on Tri-Cities Homeless Task Group and as well on the Land Use Committee. I would like an opinion as to whether or not there is an actual conflict here.
I believe Councillor Robinson was asked that before the meeting. Councillor Robinson sits on that committee as part of the whole. When we have committees, often in the community, one councillor will attend and sit on behalf of council.
We understand that, but to be on a committee that is going to make decisions based on inputs from an advocacy group of the Tri-Cities Homeless Task Group, I feel that's a conflict.
I differ with you, but that's up to Councillor Robinson. Councillor Robinson does not feel that she has a conflict of interest. She is sitting on that. She has no personal gain to come out of this whatsoever.
I understand it's not a personal gain, but there is still influence happening here. And as well, there was an online forum that we were told everything that was put forward would be presented to council. To quote the Tri-City News on October 19th from Selena Robinson, it's a poll that isn't part of our political process, so we have to wait and see if it goes through. Hopefully first reading of the bylaw, and then we have a proper public hearing where we can hear from public that's broader than this poll will be. to me, that she's just saying, you know, whatever you put into that form does not count. And we were told that everything would count and be put forward. As well, I'm seeing, going through some of the material that is on the agenda, that not all comment sheets were put forward to council.
With all due respect, I had a stack of about this much that came to my home, and then there's more in here. We have lots for and lots against the project, so we have many.
Okay, but were they all included in the documentation that went out? Because I happen to have one that I had sent on August 23rd to the city with a response back from Verna that did not show up in that.
You will hold on. I will ask staff to clarify that.
This is in here.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. That's right. The package should be complete. The cutoff date for submissions was October 15th. Anything received after that would then go on to the public hearing if supported by council.
I understand that too, but this is October 25th, my response I got back from the city. August 25th.
Madam Chair, we'll check with the gentleman after the meeting, and if there's something that was missed, we'll make sure it gets circulated.
Because that kind of makes me suspect, like, are they putting everything forward or not?
Staff is pretty diligent about doing that, I can assure you. I believe Councillor Robinson wants to reply to your...
Yeah. I guess I just want to reflect on the statements that were picked up by one of the local reporters when asked what did I think about the online poll, the results. And my perspective is, what I think is that that is a piece of information that unless we go to a public hearing, I don't know, I won't have all of the information before me. I have some, absolutely.
Okay, I understand that too.
But the public hearing is what's going to bring all of the information forward to us, and that's what I hope for.
Okay,
that is what I hope for, is that we have a public hearing.
But your comments basically discount that form, even though we were told by numerous city officials that this is all part of the record.
It's one piece of the record. I think Councillor Reid was pretty clear, and no exaggeration. There's a pile of paper we have all received.
A lot of it came from us.
There's been a lot of it. So, and reading through all that is really important, and it is a part of the information that we receive. So just looking at that one online poll is a very small piece of what we get.
I understand that too. But
and so my
for you to state that
is,
it's not part of the political process.
Well, it's one sentence that I said in a whole conversation. It is part of the political process, but I want the bigger piece.
Okay, we're done now. Do you have anything further? Your 5 minutes are up, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds extra.
Okay, in conclusion, we and those we represent strongly disapprove of this type of facility being built anywhere near residential and retail business areas. Both Mayor Trasolini and Mayor Moore have gone on record stating this is a provincial jurisdiction, not civic. Since the brush clearing was completed, we have noted that property crime in our neighborhood has decreased substantially. We want to keep it this way. We accept our homes are near a rail line when we purchased them, and the proposed shelter property at that time would be developed for commercial use. To rezone this property as P1 for the shelter will ruin our neighborhood. We will not feel safe on our streets. We have consulted with realtors. All have told us that the value of our homes will decrease and will be very difficult to sell. We trust our City Council will base their decisions on maintaining and enhancing the quality of life for its taxpayers. This proposal basically throws our neighborhood under the bus. How could City Council do this to a thriving neighborhood? Barrier shelters make neighborhoods unsafe and do not enhance the quality of life for those who live near them. We are all in favor of helping those less fortunate, but feel our neighborhood is being sacrificed to achieve this. This is by no means a win-win situation. Our neighborhood will be the big loser in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there will be a staff and RCMP report following.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, you wanted to make your report now? And I also want to mention that there is an on-table item, so if you want to elaborate on that, please, for the people in the audience that need to pick it up.
Yes, certainly, Madam Chair. There is a report at the back of the chamber here. It's on blue paper because it's technically being received today on table by the committee, with your indulgence. And what this report is, it provides a little bit more information. We've received considerable input on this application, and in going through that, there were some questions that there may not have been sufficient information. So what we've tried to do is address that very, very briefly so you can look at it at a glance. As well, there's some additional graphics attached. There's an area map, an air photo showing the proposed shelter site and subject property relative to some other public spaces in that area. There's also some photos and aerial photo location maps for other shelters around the region. There's the quite recent successful one out in the city of Langley, plus a couple that have been operating for a couple of years on the North Shore there too. So just to give a little bit of a comparison context for this application today. So as I said, that is at the back of the chamber there on table.
Excuse me, could you put our drawing up? The concept drawing, you know how we like pictures.
Sure. A picture or a photo is worth 1,000 words. So,
and I'm trying to keep the meeting short, so pictures are better.
Okay. I'll be economic with my words. Just a few comments, if I may, Madam Chair. Just the technicalities here. What is before the committee and then ultimately before council is an application by the city for an OCP official community plan amendment and companion rezoning. This is for the site at 3030 Gordon. And where it's currently service commercial in our official community plan, it's proposed for two different designations. One would be civic institutional at the east end of the site, roughly the third east corner of the site, and general commercial on the balance of the property. The zoning that's proposed to go along with that would be C2, it's a general commercial zone, which is a pretty common zone in our city center, the shopping centers and such. And for the proposed housing shelter site would be the P1 civic institutional. Before you today is the proposed bylaw to amend the official community plan and the zoning bylaw to allow this to go ahead. What is really at the heart of this is to have a site, what I would say is a suitable site that would be shelf-ready to go once the provincial government is in a position to start announcing funding for these sorts of housing shelter projects around the Lower Mainland. That's presently on hold, that program, but by moving forward and having the site appropriately designated in our official community plan and appropriately zoned, it moves us up the list of priorities, and so it stands a better chance of hopefully receiving the provincial government's approval for that. Just very briefly, as the gentleman mentioned, a lot of material has been received. We have sifted through that and try to address that in part with the report. As well, if this application goes to public hearing, we'll have further information at that time. But also, just as an observation, it is helpful. It's a difficult proposal. It's obviously causing some strong feelings out there, but there's in the questions, in the comments, it's useful, it's helpful to understand what those concerns and issues are, and hopefully we can try to address that. To help with that, I'm just going to turn over to a couple of other staff, because this initiative has been, there's a cross-department staff group that are working with the task force on this. And so with that is Perry Stanisha, our city lands manager, so he'll provide a few comments. And as well, we're very fortunate today to have a member of the RCMP who came in on his day off. He is a liaison with the homelessness task group and has a lot of experience around the existing shelters that have been operating, so he'll be commenting as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stanisha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the manager of city lands, I have a responsibility to look at our city assets as a bigger picture, and some of the rationale, I want to focus on 2 points on this particular piece of property. The one point that I've heard at the open houses was there was some concern about height on the market building, and the other concern was the work we've done currently on the site to assist with the public safety issues in the area. So I'll focus on those 2 points. The number 1 point is when we look at lands, we look at them very strategically. We just don't take our land assets lightly. This particular piece of property, we looked at it to see what was the best use for this. The market component of the property, the 2/3 that is going to be right next door to the shelter, we had a look at some of the other shelters in the area to see what was next door to them and to see how we could do something on this property. So what we did is we strategically looked at Coquitlam in seeing what the demand was. And the demand we've gotten over the past 2 to 3 years quite a bit of interest in the property for office type use, but more specifically the type of use that would be like from a public perspective, public bodies, provincial governments, federal governments, and the nonprofit sector. So we figured that, okay, strategically this property might have a good match where we can put the market component right next door to the shelter, and if there's a nonprofit interest in the market component of the building, that would serve the homeless shelter very positively, because we could make a real strong attempt with the city owning the property and controlling the request for proposal process that we would go through, and making the market component available and controlling that process to try to encourage as much as we can to have some complementary uses that would really benefit the shelter and, more importantly, benefit the community. The other purpose of the market component is to get people in there working in that area. There's a medical building that was constructed 3 or 4 years ago that was successful, and we want to see a bit more of that in that area and bring more people into that area, that business area north of the tracks. We feel that that would really strengthen the community, especially since it's in close proximity to Westwood and the retail amenities and transportation. As for the height, we were considering going 4 stories on the market component, and that's some of the negative feedback we received. But under the proposed zoning here of C2 commercial, the zoning only allows for 2-story. If we were to go more than 2 stories, we would have to apply for a variance through that process when there's someone that acquires a site and actually wants to build something. We're a ways away from that, especially since I don't know if this is going to be rezoned or not. So the 4-story is a proposal that we were putting forward in our mind only at this point to accommodate the demand that we've been receiving from the nonprofit sector in program space and other nonprofit office space and the like, that sort of thing. So to provide that additional space, we would have to go higher, but that's not part of this rezoning process. If council considers this and approves it, they would be approving the height that's allowed in the C2 zoning only. Anything additional to that, council would have an opportunity to approve through a variance after that point. So that's the number one point I wanted to make from a height perspective. Public safety perspective, there's been a lot of criticism, putting it bluntly, that the city has gone out and performed a lot of grubbing and canopying the trees to a 7-foot height, and now people can see right through, clearly through the site into people's homes and that sort of thing. And the insinuation is that the city had that all planned as part of the rezoning. Well, the fact is that my job as a city manager of lands is to administer these lands and to administer the risk and to deal with any problems that occur on our city lands. That's the stuff that council never sees. That's our responsibility. We just, day to day, we operate and do what we have to do to deal with these properties. On this particular property and another one that the city owns in the area, they've been contributing a lot to the theft and the vandalism to the businesses in the area, including TELUS and Superstore and a whole bunch of other businesses. So when the RCMP approached me a year or 2 back, say, well, Perry, you know what? You guys own land here. You're part of the problem. You have to do something about this. I'm working with all the businesses, and I'm trying to get their cooperation, and you're a property owner too. We need to get your cooperation on this as well. So we talked about some ideas, and we talked about bylaw enforcement and police enforcement, and we talked about all kinds of ideas, and we put together a plan that over a period of time, what we would do is we would find some money to grub the piece of property and to canopy the trees to 7 feet to have clear sight lines. So people, that would give them a disincentive to congregate and create shelters and do whatever they have to do, which Corporal Popovich may want to elaborate on. So that's what we did, and we did that recently because that was phase 1 from our budgetary perspective to do that work. It was expensive work, and we finally tendered it and got the work done. Phase 2 of that public safety plan, whether the rezoning goes through or not, is to complete on-site and off-site improvements. And that is put sidewalk, curbs, gutters, and lighting, which is the most important, street lighting. So that's going to occur as well, whether rezoning goes through or not. And that's planned for next year sometime. So from the public safety perspective, I'll hand it over to Corporal Popowich.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, Committee, staff, and citizens. My name is Corporal Brad Popowich. I am in charge of the community response team at Coquitlam Detachment. We do community policing, community relations, and crime prevention, along with probably another couple of dozen things for both cities, Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam. So we can be spread a little thin at times. Myself and 4 other constables do that kind of work. To give you some background in addition to what Perry already said, for about 4 years now we've been following what's called the crime reduction strategy, which is we learned that we weren't always privy to an unlimited number of police officers, so the ones that we had to do the best we could with those, and started to work a little smarter with the resources we had. In doing so, we looked at different areas around the city based on crime stats that were crimes that were reported to us, and that's the key, that were reported to us. And we're creating maps with our crime analysts showing us where the most activity was happening. And it just only makes sense, I think even any businessman would agree, to go where your most customers are as opposed to somewhere where they aren't. The area around Coquitlam Centre, Town Centre, the Barnett Bus Loop, and Superstore, Christmas Way, has always what we would call a red dot on the map. And a red dot is created when it hits a certain number of files in a certain time period. There's not too many red dots around the city. In fact, there's only a couple. Consistently in the Town Centre area, in the intersection of Barnett and Lougheed, within a kilometre or 2 of that area was always a red dot. So it garnered some attention from our crime reduction unit, the prolific target team, and ourselves. Now, one of the things that we do is we look at making long-term permanent changes, or as permanent as we can be, because in terms of tree cutting, trimming, they do grow back. So it has to be ongoing and it has to be monitored. And we also do some surveying and checking on the area to make sure that it actually does have some effect. As one gentleman did a presentation earlier stated, since the cleanup has occurred, and there's been a number of cleanups in a number of different neighborhoods around the city with that goal in mind, the crime stats have gone down. It's somewhat supported by statistics. It's very much supported by the people who go around and talk to the neighborhood. As I found myself when I went around to the Christmas Way neighborhood and spoke to the business owners there, they had simply stopped phoning the police because they had had so many occurrences and so many things were happening to them. The first thing I have to do is encourage everybody and tell you for certain that the police are not going to come unless you phone, because this is a big city and there are only so many of us. Bring it to our attention. It may be that we're not able to do anything about it, but we certainly aren't going to do anything about it if we're not aware of it. Again, the reason the attention came to this neighborhood is because of crime statistics, things that were reported to us. We can only act on the information that we have. I do go out occasionally and try to solicit it myself because I hear about things from people that come in and talk to me on a casual basis, and even some things from city staff and from councillors. So we do try to check into that and see what's going on, and often it is people just exasperated and they've just given up phoning. So what I would do is encourage you all to protect your properties as much as you can by keeping it clean, neat and tidy, and doing some of the things that were done in Gordon Avenue. And that's not the first and not the only place that it's been done. Glen Park is another classic spot of that. Years ago, the underbrush near Glen Elementary was cleaned up to a certain level as a result of parents' concerns about their children being approached by persons of ill repute. I don't know, lack of the correct word to describe them, but nothing particularly really happened all that much, but there was a perception that people were unsafe, and that certainly increased their perception of safety and reduced the number of calls we got almost to nothing in terms of people being disturbed, people being scared of walking through the neighborhood. Now, again, a long time ago, long before I'm also a member of the Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group. I sit on them as I sit on the group as the law enforcement representative. But long before I even became aware of the homeless shelter coming to Gordon Avenue or the task group even existing, when I took on this job a little over a year ago, I was already out in that neighborhood because of the red dot. So the work that got done there is just part of an ongoing process throughout the city to try and make some permanent changes to reduce the the ability for these people to hide and act with impunity. If you keep them in the dark and you allow them to hide behind things, they will do all kinds of neat stuff. They find those places nearby parking lots and businesses very handy to come and open up packages they've stolen from nearby shops, from shoplifting, rifle through your briefcase after they've stolen it from your car, go through your mail after they've stolen it from your house. If you remove the ability of what I like to call them is thief camps, they're not always homeless camps, they're sometimes just simply, it's a nice place to be because it's close to where you can take a whole bunch of things. And by removing them and by cleaning up the area, and also by doing some of the things, as Perry's suggesting, building a number of businesses around the area, including the medical building, which created normal activity, what we call it, as opposed to abnormal activity. The more citizens that are around, the more normal activity that there is, the less likely it is that the folks that are coming around to do crime will hang around there. So it goes in many different directions. Light it up, light them up, clean up the area, don't allow garbage to accumulate, replace your light bulb when it burns out, fix the broken window. If it doesn't look cared for, if you don't care for your city, if you don't care for your property, nobody else will. So there's only so much I can do and so much the police can do in terms of if the phone rings, we'll answer it and we'll come out and do what we can for you, whatever that is. But if we're not aware of it, it's pretty hard to do something. So my mandate is to try and make some permanent changes around the city that are a little bit out of the box and not quite what you would call normal law enforcement activities or what you would expect of the police. Myself and the police officers that work for me, we go out and we arrest people, we lay charges, but we look at things like what is making you folks perceive that you're unsafe in your community. Large expanses of graffiti on walls, accumulations of garbage, and people camping in areas where it's just a little too close for comfort to where you want to walk around and feel safe. Whether you're actually at risk of these people or not is another thing entirely, but it seems like the perception is the overriding issue here. So I try to deal with that as well as the facts and the statistics that are in front of me. Just to be quick and to finish off, the business in the area, again, the more you can create that normal activity, the less the abnormal activity will occur and the less crime there will be in the area. It'll go down anecdotally, statistically, and that's been proven time and time again. The crime stats have gone down somewhat in the area as a result of moving camps. Some of the camps that existed now, or that exist now, didn't exist before. These people will move around. You can move them all you want. They will find a place to go. And I know that there's quite a number of them within a 2-kilometer radius of Gordon Avenue because all of the services and all the things they need and all of the dumpsters that they need to climb into and all the bottles they need to take are close by. It's an area of high activity. There's lots of pickings there. And no matter what you do, you will find that they will always be there. It's just a matter of trying to control them, get them some treatment for their addictions, and if you can remove them from the street, I think you would find that folks will be not calling the police quite as much to say that there's a guy sleeping in the ATM machine or in the doorway of their business because they won't have to.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your report. I believe that does all the delegations and it completes all the information that we have on this item from the committee. Are there any? Excuse me.
That's certainly not equal time. It was my committee and I protest everything that's going on here.
Well, you
Some of you people obviously are democratic and true to your constituents and that, and members of this city, the rest of you have an agenda, and that's all that matters.
Thank you.
Talking over there was brought forward by people on the opposite side from us over here. We live there. Our lives will be ruined. There's a Tom Jones song out of my movie, like a snake, and the snake bites her.
We've heard from you, sir. Enough. Enough.
Enough is right. Let's get out there.
Is there anybody from the committee that has a question for staff?
No.
If not, we'll carry on. Next item, please, before I have to have someone removed.
Item 7 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, Preliminary Report on Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw Number 4166-2010 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw Number 4167-2010 for 3030 Gordon Avenue. Staff recommendation is that 1, Council give first reading to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw Number 4166-2010. 2, that Council give first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw Number 4167-2010, and that the aforementioned bylaws and related applications be referred to public hearing.
Okay, any questions? Any debate? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. The document that we had on table, please reference partway down the page to fencing.
Yes.
Which doesn't appear on the illustration at the back of the document, and I'm wondering, is that just because of differing ages of the documents, or was it left out so I could see the building better, or what's intended in terms of fencing? And I have a second fencing question, which you may or may not have the answer to. Somewhere in all the material that I've read, it says the rail line is fenced on both sides, and I wanted to confirm that that was the case.
Mr. McIntyre.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple comments. The attachment 5, that was an early piece. That's a concept drawing to give an illustration idea of what the facility could look like. A view from the street, there's no fencing there. I think, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that's some of the feedback we're getting, is what about fencing? How is the site contained? How is it secured? And so that's the sort of thing that we've made note of, and if the project is to go forward, that would be one of the elements that would be called for in the plan for the facility, and it be dealt with at the development permit stage if the project proceeded to that point. So that's the sort of thing, that plus some ample landscaping would take care of that. The fencing along the CP corridor, perhaps I can ask Rob Innes to speak to that. My general understanding, though, is that CP prefers to have the CPR corridor fenced off for safety reasons, if nothing else. There are areas along that where the fence sometimes is removed or is missing, but perhaps Rob can just clarify with regard to the site here.
Okay, if we can quickly, it is 3 o'clock and we have 8 more items, so Mr. Innes.
Madam Chair, I was just out on the site on Saturday, and in answer to the question, there is a chain link fence that is at the back of the city properties for part of it, but there is the fence is missing for part of it. But again, as the general manager of planning and development said, that there would be ample fencing and screening that would be required should the project move forward. And I'm just referring to the city property.
That answers
That's
your
all.
question.
Thank you.
Anything else from the committee? No? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on. This will bring the, do you have a date for the public hearing, Ms. Laura, before we move forward?
This item will be going forward to the November 29th public hearing, should council refer it there on November 1st.
And it goes to the next council meeting to be voted on to go to public hearing.
We'll go to the November 1st council meeting and be referred to November 29th public hearing.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item 8 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, Preliminary Report on Application for Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4165-2010 and 5% Parkland dedication requirements for proposed subdivision at 3362 Mason Avenue. The recommendation is that Council 1, give first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4165-2010. 2, refer City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4165 an application to public hearing. And 3, require the owner of the proposed subdivision to provide 5% in cash in lieu to address the provisions of Section 941 of the Local Government Act.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 9 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, Authorization of Development Variance Permit 10-012877DV and Development Permit 09005-405 DP for an addition to an existing industrial building at 915 Tupper Avenue. Recommendation is that 1, Council approve the signing and sealing of Development Variance Permit, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the City of Coquitlam. And 2, that Council approve the signing and sealing of the associated Development Permit, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the City of Coquitlam.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 10 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, Authorization for Issuance of Development Variance Permit 10-014128DV, 1943 Custer Court. The recommendation is that Council approve the signing and sealing of Development Variance Permit, and the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the City of Coquitlam.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? I have a question on this one. I'm having a bit of difficulty with this because I have been around when we have lost some of our good residents to Port Moody as they slide down the slope. Next year, I understand that there's going to be an integrated watershed management plan done on this area. And why would this not be the safe and logical time to then have this application come back when all the heavy, expensive work is done for this applicant? So, Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And that's why we want to just make mention in the report, just to highlight for the committee that there is this parallel piece of work going on. I believe it came from the Engineering, Environment and Utilities Standing Committee. It would be an update of the geotechnical assessment that was done quite some time ago for the Chines. And what's been explained to me, our engineering staff will be working with Metro Van in terms of first updating the integrated watershed management study, because that has a lot of bearing. That's sort of the foundation piece, and then they would be moving on to the geotechnical work. So that's going to be happening. I believe that's part of their 2011 work program. Certainly, it's for the committee and ultimately council's discretion whether that wanting to view this application in light of that broader work. This has come forward. The property owner would like to make an addition to the house. They've retained a geotechnical engineer to do the assessment and come back with recommendations on that. So they wish to move forward at this time. So that's the application is before committee this afternoon.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I'd like to know if this is passed and 20 years from now someone wants to rebuild completely, does the development variance stay in place, or will a new building call for reconsideration?
Yes, Madam Chair, no, the DVP would run with the existing building. We would ensure that any new construction would meet the existing bylaw, or any new work related to geotechnical or slope setback requirements that follows.
Thank you.
Okay, all questions are done. All in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. Carried. Next item.
Item 11 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, authorization for issuance of Development Permit 10-011406 DP for a restaurant and coffee shop drive-through Triple O's at Home Depot at 1900 United Boulevard. Recommendation is 1, that the committee forward this application to this evening's regular council meeting, which will convene after the public hearing, and 2, that council approve the signing and sealing of the development permit, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the city of Coquitlam.
Move recommendation.
Second.
Councillor Robinson.
Bike racks.
Oh, thank you for the bike racks. That's good. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And I wish to compliment staff on this. I think they did this under some of our new processes in record time. So thank you for your efficiency. Next item, please. Had nothing to do with the burgers. Next item, please.
Item 12 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development and Zoning Bylaw Text Amendment to the CS1 Service Commercial Zone, Bylaw number 4164-2010 for 1500 Lougheed Highway. Recommendation is that Council give first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4164-2010 and that the bylaw and associated application be referred to public hearing.
Recommendation.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. This is for a toll booth. Terrible thing to put in our city.
Building.
It's
Next item, please.
Building.
While they're counting their money. Next item.
Item 13 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, Zoning Bylaw Text Amendment to the RS7, RS8, RS10, and RS11 single-family zones, Bylaw number 4163-2010. Recommendation is that Council give first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4163-2010 and that the bylaw and associated application be referred to public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Just a note to this. There was some questions with respect to coach houses. They are not in the zoning bylaw yet. They're coming forward, but there will not be a secondary suite and a coach house allowed on the same lot, just for everybody's clarification. Thank you. Item 14, please.
Item 14 is Report of General Manager, Planning and Development, 5% provision of parkland pursuant to Section 941 of the Local Government Act for the proposed subdivision at 3421 Queenston Avenue. Recommendation is that Council require the owner of the proposed subdivision to provide cash in lieu equaling 5% of the market value of the lands being subdivided to address the 5% parkland provisions outlined in Section 941 of the Local Government Act.
Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Seconder? All in question? Councillor Reamer?
Thank you. How often does this happen that somebody else will buy a part of a subdivision and will have this problem with parkland allocation? Is this...
Through the chair, this is a pretty unique situation, so I would call this almost a one-off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 15 is Report of General Manager Planning and Development Application Process Improvements Update. Recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information and that a copy of the report be forwarded to the Urban Development Institute for their information.
Moved. Second. I have a question.
Councillor Reamer, then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much for this. I'm really happy to see it, and I actually thank you very much for this report. We had a presentation to our Land Use Committee quite a while ago, actually. I see it was January 25th, 2010, whereby the Urban Development Institute made several recommendations, and I see that we've basically covered them on this. So that's great. My question is with respect to the communication piece and the accessibility of information for development applicants to access online or some such thing. So I just wanted to double check on that piece.
Yes, Madam Chair. We are currently working, we've had several meetings internally with our ICT department, and we have actually accessed other municipalities' online information access systems, and we are moving towards providing some of that information and services to developers.
So that if a developer wants to check on the status of their application, they will be able to do so at some point in the near future?
Yes, that is the goal. We are looking at what hardware requirements and what software we need to put in place to make that happen, but we are moving towards that. And to that end, we want to provide an update to committee and council in the next few months as we have any significant milestones in progress. We'll report.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Did we vote on this one? Oh, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I understand that the City of Delta is actually looking at this. I spoke to one of their councillors, and their councillors are pretty excited about it. I just have a question about, and I love getting the numbers, the outcomes and stuff about where we're at. But do we have targets? Is there some target? Are we working towards some end? Like what's reasonable to expect? And recognizing that those are likely to be moving targets, given when what business is doing. So right now, I imagine they seem to be picking up, at least on this end, and they may or may not explode again. We may see a 2007 year again at some point, and so I recognize that they may be moving targets, but do we have a target that we're working towards?
Through the chair, great question, because that is something we are going to be working on for next year in terms of setting up target dates. Part of the reason we haven't done that yet is because we want to set up a much more sophisticated tracking system, that chess clock system that I mentioned in the report, about when the application's online in our court versus when it's in the applicant's court. We don't actually have that quite yet in place, but once we get that into place, we'd like to start using more of a target date system for staff to sort of have a goalpost out there for getting applications completed.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 16 are minutes of the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Task Force meeting held Thursday, October 7th. The recommendation is that the committee receive those minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And item 17 is the on-table report, and the recommendation is that the committee receive that report for information.
Receive.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's nothing else for the good of the meeting. Could I have an adjournment, please?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.